So good afternoon, everybody. I see you joining us now, coming into the webinar. I'm Alan Kirwan, the Learning and Public Engagement Curator at the Butler Gallery. And we're delighted you will join us today for our third in the series of the talk series that we're doing around Cartoon Saloon and the WolfWalkers movie. As you know, it's streaming now already on Apple TV. And as I've been saying in all the other talks that you joined, I know we have a lot of regular returns coming back every week and then also fresh people. But if you haven't seen the original cartoon work, you can actually log on to the Butler Gallery website, butlergallery.ie, where we have a virtual tour, virtual exhibition, and it takes you through some fantastic rooms, interactive features where you can see a lot of the original work that went into the movie. Also, just today, as I got the good news, is that we have on our website, on our learning pages, and thanks to Cartoon Saloon's team and their artists, tomorrow, if you have any budding young illustrators in your families at home over lockdown, wherever you may be, we're uploading some of the original graphic work that you can download for young people to draw, to color. So maybe it will inspire them to be future illustrators in the future. So today in the series, we're delighted to be joined by Paul Young and Katja Schumann. It's the perspective of the producers, and they will give us this new insight into their roles. And they will be in conversation with Ann Mulrooney. And Ann is the studio manager at Cartoon Saloon and previously director of visual, the Centre for Contemporary Art in Carlow, also the director of the Science Gallery in Dublin, and a host of other exhibitions to her name. So the conversation will be about 45 minutes. And I do encourage you all to ask questions that you may have over the course of this time in our Q&A section or the chat, whichever is easier for you, the device you're using. And then I will come back at the end of the conversation and put that questions to Katja and to Paul, and maybe try to squeeze in some others that we didn't manage to answer from some of the other talk series. Okay, so enjoy the talk, and Anne, I will let you take over.
Thanks, Alan, and welcome everybody. Big thanks also to Animation Ireland and Screen Skills Ireland for their support in making this series happen. Today we're joined by Katja Schumann, who's head of production in Cartoon Saloon, and Paul Young, who is CEO, co-founder, and was also a producer on WolfWalkers. Huge congratulations, first of all, on the Golden Globes nomination yesterday, and to all of the WolfWalkers crew. That's fantastic, and we'll come back to that later. But I did want to start by asking you both individually about your own paths to becoming producers. And we might start with Katja, if you don't mind. Katja, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up here in Kilkenny in Cartoon Saloon?
Hi, and yeah, it was a long and windy road from Germany to Kilkenny in Ireland. So I started in animation in 1995 in Munich. And I started in digital ink and paint as an intern in a studio that just started up there back then, which was a great timing for me, a great opportunity, because as I was there at the start, I started to be like very naturally be a member of the core group. So very quickly from intern, they hired me. I was then quite quickly the ink and paint supervisor, and then I started in compositing as a compositor, and worked very, very closely with who was back then my mentor, Kolja Ehrmann. And yeah, so I, in one production, basically started as an intern and ended up pretty much as, in compositing. And on the next project, I was compositing supervisor. And I did that for several years in different studios. So in Munich, and then I also went to London, worked in London quite a bit, worked on Warner's. So yeah, and the kind of one of the, what I find was great when I was younger is you work for one project. So after a year or two, you probably then gonna start looking for another project, so you travel a lot. So I was constantly like, I would be a year in Munich, then I would be a few months in London, then I worked in Copenhagen, which is great. Then in 2006, I came to Ireland and I started working in Cartoon Saloon as a compositor on their series Kung Fu, about a year. And then after that, I did a bit of work in Dublin. And I think it was about that time that then I started toying with the idea of maybe switching from compositing into production. And in compositing, because it's where the backgrounds, the animation, the effects, CG elements, it all flows into compositing. So it gives you a pretty good insight of the whole production pipeline. As a supervisor, you are naturally also involved with the planning and spreadsheets and deadlines. So it wasn't a massive transition from the compositing side to working then in production. And I came back to Cartoon Saloon in 2010 as a coordinator. My first project there, I coordinated a small service job at Hopcat. And then I've been there ever since. And I was very lucky that from project to project, I got the opportunity to take on more responsibility. So production coordinator, production manager, line producer, now head of production. So it was a great learning curve for me. And obviously I'm very lucky to be here now in this position at this point of time.
I'm sorry about that, Katja. The studio phone is diverted to my phone at the moment. And even though I've got the phone off, it rings on my laptop.
Yeah.
So I've just stuck it on off for the moment.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Probably really important calls coming through. I'm sorry about that. It's very disconcerting when you're in the middle of an answer and someone's phone goes.
It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry.
So you've been here for 14 years. And
I've been in Ireland for 14 years. Yeah, I have no intention to leave. I really love it here. I love working in Cartoon Saloon. It's a great, it's a very nice family environment. You know, like work it's not very how do I say hierarchical or anything. So I think it's a nice place to be.
And it struck me as you were talking that, so you spoke about how you were in a small studio, you were in the core group, and naturally you could advance quite quickly in that case. But obviously you had a strength in the structural and administration side of things as well as in the artistic side.
Yes, I think that's probably true. And I think that probably also describes animation in general, because obviously it's a very creative, artistic area, but also it needs a lot of organization, structure. It's a big machine. There's so many people working on the one project, and it's a huge need to have it in a kind of in a controlled way, but it still leaves enough freedom for people to obviously be creative and have ideas and bring them to the table. But overall, I think animation might be less of a freely creative profession than you might think of if you're not working in it, because it's all very, it all needs to fit together. So it's really important that all the departments work well together, all the artists in a department do basically the same work. You know, the character at the end, when you see it on screen, it needs to look exactly the same. All the artists need to follow the model sheets. So there's quite a task to keep it all, you know, organized in a way that you achieve that result.
And for you, Paul, what was your path to today?
Yeah, well, quite different to Katja's, and I have enormous. I love Katja because of what she does. Because making an animated film is very complex. I mean, it's a really complex system, actually. When you come into, I think when people come in and they look at it from the outside, they go, "Gee, it's really quite hard. It's so many moving parts. You need really good production managers, line producers, people who understand the schedules and know how different departments can come in, which is why Katja and all our team are great for us, because I come from quite a different side of things. I guess I was like, didn't expect to be a producer very early on. It's just because meeting up with Tom and Nora back in college, we started working together, And I always joke, although it's not quite true, but when we set up the studio together, I sort of was the one who was beside the phone and next to the computer. So I wound up talking to people more, and I started enjoying that. So I wound up becoming kind of the traveling salesman for the company. I would go out and try to find the money, go to like London, Cannes, all the places where there might be festivals and events, and even Jerry Sheeran back in the day, when myself and Tom were kind of going looking for advice from people up in Dublin from some of the studios that existed. I remember going into Jerry, and at the time he was running Terraglyph, and we'd no idea how to do this. Jerry to us was like the ultimate producer, because we went into his office, and us who were all artists, I was an illustrator myself before I started, and used to do caricatures on the beaches in Greece and try to be a cartoonist. But we kind of dove in at the deep end and said, well, it'll take us about 7 years to get a feature film made, so we may as well start now. And Tom already had this ambition to do what became The Secret of Cows. So we started there. But I remember going into Jerry, and we went into his office, and he had just spreadsheets and budgets stuck on his walls around him. And oh my gosh, I really hate that stuff. We wish we had a Jerry. If only Jerry would look after us. But in a way, you kind of have to learn that stuff too. So we did, and we read books. And actually, the line producer of My Father's Dragon with us now, Zara, she wrote a book on producing animation from America, and it was one of the first books we read. Oh, how do you make a film? Like, because we all came from college and straight into starting our own studio. So we did jump in at the deep end. So we didn't quite have experience even with working in other studios to this level. We kind of had to learn it. And which had severe stressful effects on many people we worked with, because, but we got there with Secret of Cows and learned a lot from that, and learned a lot from doing short films, and learned about how you put money together.
So there's a couple of things. Firstly, just for anyone who's unfamiliar, Jerry Sheeran is now the managing director of Cartoon Saloon. So
yes, I should have said that. We did get our Jerry in the end. Myself and Tom walked out of his office, and I said, geez, well, I wish we had a Jerry. And now we have Jerry, which is great, because many years later, when we realized we wanted to hire a managing director to help us with the business and to relax us a bit, to get us back into the creative a bit more, to allow us to focus on creative things again. We wanted a managing director who understood the business and understood production, which Jerry did. And so that was great. So we were able to hire Jerry.
So just even from how the two of you speak, you talk about very different aspects of production. So Katja, you talk a lot about the underlying structure of the film and managing that. And Paul, you talk about bringing in the finance and those external partners. And for outsiders looking at credits, they'll look at film credits and they'll see maybe there's 14 different producers listed there. There's producers, executive producers, line producers. And I wonder, can you tell us a little bit about the differences between those so that we have a better understanding?
Well, maybe if I was to describe, like, there's producers are very different, defined very differently depending on the company you're in or the studio. For us, for me as a producer, I see it as like when like you have an idea for a film or a TV series, the producer, me in most of these cases, I'm there with, let's say Tom, or it's Nora or Louise Bagnall who's doing the next film, and I'm there at the very beginning and also sort of at the very end. So trying to come up with who might be the writer to work with that director. If it's director who's bringing a project, or it's me as a producer who has found a project and then matching it up with a director. And then, so what the director and the producer kind of have this partnership at the beginning where you're creatively I'm creatively trying to find the right people to work with that director and fill in the gaps that they don't have. And then trying to find who our partners are going to be. What's the audience for this? Where are we going to get development money for in the beginning? And then that could take 5 years of a little bit of development work and finding a writer, getting a script done. You might not really send out a script until you've got the 6th draft of it done, which can take a long time. And then you're starting to find partners like an Apple or partners in Europe, as we did at the beginning in France. And you go out then and you pitch it sometimes at an event like Cartoon Movie, or for a TV series, Cartoon Forum, and it's kind of, you launch your project, then you create a Bible, you create a kind of document. And this might be happening across a couple of projects as a producer. And then when you get the finance, when the money kind of is in the door, I'd already been working with somebody like Katja as our head of production, kind of figure out what the budget for this is. Is this what is the budget for this film? And when you get that in, then really that's when Katja takes over more full time on that project as a line producer. So when it comes to like, we have above the line costs and below the line. So sometimes the above the line is the writer, some actor that I might have, like back in the day, chasing down Brendan Gleeson at the Galway Film Festival and trying to get him to look at our drawings of our characters, see, and then you get that person in and you try to attach certain key creative. And then when you have the budget, Katja then is looking after really the whole production from there on in. And then I kind of might, during that time, maybe sometimes there's political things to get involved in with co-producers, or there's things like that, or trying to figure out problems with a partner somewhere, but generally speaking, Katja as a line producer and the other line producers are looking after that project then full time, and all the crew on it and the schedule. And at the end then, when it's complete, you're back in kind of on the marketing and, you know, making sure when it's finished that an audience sees it. You know,
so Katja, you're taking over once it's green lit, basically.
More or less, sometimes a little bit sooner. So yeah, I think you could kind of describe it to some degree that so Paul makes sure the plane takes off, and then from when the project takes off to landing the project, that's me then. And then I'm a little bit involved then with marketing and promotional, just because obviously we have to provide material from the production of the film. But yeah, in a way you could, if you wanted to simplify it, maybe describe it like this. So I normally come in, as Paul described, when it comes to, okay, what would be our budget? Because we need that to finance the project. So to finance it, we'll have to show a budget and a schedule. So I will provide the budget and the schedule. Obviously, it depends. It's a bit the chicken and the egg. How much it's going to cost? How much can we raise? So you find your way between that. So I create budget and schedule, and then either once we have a green lit or once we are very confident that it will be green lit, then we start basically with pre-production, which is the storyboarding, the animatic, and the designs. Then you go into the whole big production then, where the team grows very big, and then until post-production. And then when we have basically the film ready, when we have a master that can be screened, this is the big relief then for me, because this is then when it's in the bag. And also, I think another thing maybe about a line producer, on a project, you normally only have one line producer, because this is the central person that oversees everything. And that's important also. Sometimes obviously you can have a number of producers, like, depending on how many co-production partners you have, or how many producers, but there really should be one line producer. So it's also quite clear, who's overseeing the project once it's in pre-production or production.
As well as being an individual line producer on projects, you're also a head of production. So you're looking at the big picture and how individual productions fit into that kind of medium-term schedule for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Well, at the moment, I'm only head of production. So WolfWalker, when I was on WolfWalker, and that was for a few years, so I would probably, most of my time would be in relation to WolfWalkers, and then a smaller proportion of my time would be then overseeing other projects, also as head of production. Kind of, you are there to fill the gap before we have a line producer. So let's say the producers want to know for a new project, what would the budget look like, what would the schedule look like. Obviously, we haven't started the project yet, we don't have the funds yet, so there isn't a line producer yet. So this is when I start off, but then I will hand it over once we have a line producer in place, because it really it's quite a big responsibility and a big job, so you don't want to have too many other distractions on the side. So that's at the moment with WolfWalker, really, you know, obviously the production is finished, but we're still doing quite a lot of promotional and marketing. So I'm still working quite a bit on WolfWalkers, but I have more time now to also look at the other projects and upcoming projects.
And with both of you, was there a point, because I'm conscious there's a lot of people watching now who may be thinking about animation as a career and wondering where they might fit in that scheme of things. Did either of you set out thinking, I know, I'll be a producer?
I certainly didn't know.
No, I was quite a reluctant producer at first. I didn't quite know, it's same as anybody, didn't quite know what it was, and I realized, oh, I'm a producer actually, because it involves a mixture of kind of being a bit of a salesperson, where you try to go and you're trying to drum up the money for it, find partners who become the co-producers. And on that question of kind of like the difference in different producers is also executive producers. And sometimes they're people who are attached to money that's coming in. Like Angelina was an executive producer on Breadwinner, for example, but her name is there to help with advice for Nora, but also she provided a kind of like awareness for helping raise money in different places for the film. Or there might be an agent that we worked with.
By the way, that's Angelina Jolie, who Paul refers to by her first name.
Sorry. Yeah, and then it could be somebody from like Screen Ireland who invests money, and sometimes they have an executive producer title on it, or it could be, and then you find out where we have often done, we found a partner in France or a partner in Luxembourg who are bringing money from Luxembourg to do a set amount of work. So we do deals with them and they become a co-producer. And so they have their own studio and they're like bringing cash that they've raised with their fund or their tax, or with from selling it to a distributor. So that producer goes out and try to find. So I realized, because I wound up, be going to London into like Studio Canal to try to, can you give me an advance for the rights for the film in the UK, and can you give me like 250,000 or whatever it is to pay for those rights? And sometimes they're great meetings because they'll say yes, but usually it's just a slow Chinese trip torture to get people to give you the money. But so it just sort of became, it's just sort of something we learned along the way by going to markets, by going to MIPCOM for TV and going to like the film festivals, and the people you meet there, have even after the hours of when you're supposed to meet people. Like, I mean, when you're starting out, it was very difficult for us to even get meetings into these offices, but you kind of get to know people around the periphery over the years. And so realize, okay, that's what a producer does in one sense. And and then there's producers that are in big studios like Disney, where they're employed by the studio. The studio, they might go to the studio and say, I've got an idea to produce this book, How to Train Your Dragon, and me and this director want to do it. And they pitch to the head, or it comes the other way. And then they're pitching to their own bosses but then they're still working kind of in the same way, because they're going, I'm going to work with you and this director, I'm going to find the writer, we're going to figure out the team. But they're sort of being paid to do that. And, and that's something that's greenlit by the studio. So there's many different types, but for most people in this side of the world are independent filmmaking, like we are, it's about finding other producers around Europe to help you put the money together.
There must be challenges inherent in that. So firstly,
yes,
working with people outside of the studio, and secondly, working with other languages, thirdly, working with other agendas. I mean, how do you solve creative differences? And whose job is that? Is that Katja or is that Paul?
Katja is very good at that, and it sometimes falls one or the other in the early years. I think we learned a lot from doing Secret of Cows as a 3-way co-production, and then Song of the Sea was like 4 or 5 different studios. And I think one of the big things we did which helped was, it's all about communication. And so when Song of the Sea started, you want to feel like you're all working towards the same goal and with the director. And as long as you kind of make it clear with your co-producers that in most of those cases where we've developed the show, let's say the director, I always try to make sure that, look, the director has final say creatively. And then it's up to us as producers to make that work. But, also then up to the director to kind of know, look, with the confidence of knowing that I've got final say creatively, I also then have to listen as well. Because I think if a director has the confidence that they will have the final say creatively, they're open to all kinds of questions and opinions creatively as well on inputs. And then it's up to us as producers to try to make that work, And so back in Song of the Sea, we brought, like, let's say, the whole background team from Luxembourg. We spent a week in Sligo in Macree Castle, actually. It was very cheap at the time. There was nobody there in the winter. And we stayed for a few days and got to know each other and painted, took photographs and went on walks. And that kind of was a bit of team building. And then the leadership from those places, like the supervisors, stayed in Kilkenny and worked with our art director. And then when they went back to their studio, they kind of had a sense of what was going to be needed. And now we've done that, we haven't done that all the time, and it's hard to do that all the time, but that would be the ideal. Katja would probably even know more when it comes to that and the different challenges we face there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously every production comes with challenges, so I think it would be it would be an illusion to, or that's actually something I learned. You think, oh, with more experience, I should be able to set it up in a way where everything runs smoothly, and that's not how it will work in reality. I find, because especially on the features, every feature is a prototype. You have directors, you have a different team, so it always takes quite a bit of time to figure it out. People in new positions and different directors want different things, so it's always going to be hard, and especially because obviously our artistic standard is very high. So you have on every production, you have the kind of push from pushing the artistic as high up as possible, but then obviously we're dealing with limited resources. We have a fine amount of money, which means we can only afford to have so many people on the team. So there's always this kind of push against each other. And obviously, in a way, as a line producer, you are a little bit in the middle of this. So you have to find the spot where creatively the directors are really happy with it. And I guess it might be different in different studios. I feel in our case, probably the creative takes priority a lot of the time. So we really try to get the creative vision from our directors realized. And this is then why, in the end, you have such a beautiful product and you get so great reviews. So it's worth it. I would say maybe it's also a little bit different on episodic shows, where when you deal with these smaller chunks, it's easier to let it go creatively and say, okay, this is as good we can get it on this episode. The next episode will be better. So I find on the episodic shows where you have also this momentum where you have to deliver every week or every month. So there seems to, on the episodic shows, I think the schedule sometimes takes priority, but on the features, we really try to allow for the best possible artistic result. So this is then where you have to sometimes find, okay, how can we make this work? We're not hitting our quotas. What can we do? And this is the challenges you will have in nearly every production, I would think. And it's a natural process.
And we're very lucky. We've a very talented crew. I mean, our crew in the studio, really resourceful, and we try to keep it fairly, as much as possible, fairly lateral in structure, so that people can put their hand up if they see a problem. But also lucky that with the likes of the directors, we have like Nora, Tom, and Louise, and Morris on all the projects, and different people, and that, there's different people have different talents. Like Tom himself is pretty talented at drawing and storyboarding. He can take a lot of that, and he when he thinks of a film, he does think fairly economically. He does it in such a way he kind of knows what he can get sometimes out of a budget. And then there's certain sequences are going to be difficult, so you try to go, right, this is going to be a problem, we need to put some resources here, we're going to know. But there's always over budget and under budget. You're always come up, as Katja said, every film is different and every director is different, and there's different challenges each time. And then some directors are very story focused, and they like to work in the edit, and then they need more scaffolding around them when it comes to artistic direction. And then some directors are more very much want the story guys around them to help. And so it's really interesting, but it's really different each time, which makes it very interesting. Every project is very different.
What's kind of fascinating there is that from what you've said, it sounds like having a real grasp and an understanding of the finances actually supports you creatively as a director.
Yeah, well, it certainly, certainly at the beginning for myself, Tom, and Nora, we had to we were company directors. We had a very detailed understanding of the finances, particularly after Secret of Cows finished and Skunk Fu. It was a disaster because we'd none. We wound up in a situation, and this is a big lesson, where we put all our resources into making these two projects, which suddenly came in like buses. We were waiting for a bus for a long time, and 3 come in. So we were waiting for the money for both Skunk Fu and Secret of Cows, and then we got both of them off the ground. We went from 15 people to maybe 75, working with different places. All our resources were Katja, we remember, back in Skunk, when Katja was a compositor in Skunk Fu, but all our focus was on just getting these made with no sight of the future, really. Well, we were trying what's going to come up next, but we've nothing lined up. So the big lesson we learned there was that we need more people, we need more producers to work with. Sometimes we're like, oh, we'll make it all ourselves, but we need to butcher ourselves with more production management talent and heads, more people to help figure out the business side. And also, so that next time when we finish a film, and thankfully over the last few years, we've been able to roll from one feature film into the next, when pre-production finishes on Breadwinner, those people were able to roll into WolfWalkers or the next project in those departments. So even Katja looks at a schedule that's a studio schedule, not just an individual films. So you have an animation department, and you have a pre-production team, and you have compositing, and like where are all those people going to go when they finish this project? Is there another show lined up? And that's partly very much my job as sort of head of development, just to make sure that next project is ready to go. And we realized that you need to have probably at the minimum, sort of 3 productions happening in your studio if we want to keep all the crew we have, which we're used to, and with people we're used to working with. We want to grow and their skills to grow, and for them to actually have a career in the studio. We need to have about 3 productions in production. So if there's a gap between one, there's another one underneath where those people can sort of fall into, which also helps having Lighthouse here, and part of that, having the second studio and encouraging that studio to set up here, and us partnering with Mercury to set that up, so we can create a sort of pool of talent in Kilkenny that, and there's been a little bit of crossover between the studios, but actually we've been thankful in Carton Saloon, we've been able to roll so far for the last few years from one project to the next. So that's also part of the wider view. So we might have 3 big projects in production, like maybe a TV series and 2 features at different stages. And then we have maybe 6 or 7 projects that are in development that have no money yet, but have some development money, and that we're trying to find the partners on.
So skill in Tetris is
to
be advised. I've seen this.
Katja's sketches look like Tetris games.
Yeah, dramatic.
Yeah, and funny enough, that was when computers started off. This is where I spent a lot of time on playing Tetris on my first Apple computer in the 90s. You wouldn't have thought that this actually comes in handy now.
It all paid off. I'm interested in Apple's involvement in WolfWalkers, because I think probably that was quite a game changer for the film and for the How did that come about?
Yeah, well, I was saying when we were chatting before we came on, there's a few days in your life as a producer that you really remember, and there's like 3 or maybe 2 to 3 that are a real after the day I went, that felt great. I felt like I've done some good producing there. But I think Apple came on board. It's like just like when we got Song of the Sea and we managed to get some money from Studio Canal, that felt good, because usually you're going and finding money here and money there from different people, and you rarely get a yes answer on the same day. And that was Studio Canal with Song of the Sea were able to give us money. I remember Danny Perkins and being able to come out of his office in London. He says, well, how much do you want? And he had remembered Secret of Cows, and he was able to say, here's some money towards your film. Apple came about because WolfWalkers was kind of going our usual route of European co-production, which is what it is still. We had French partners, a Chinese investment partner who had taken rights to our previous films in China, and also Luxembourg, who with Studio 352 would work with. So we kind of had WolfWalkers on the way, but we still needed some more money. But we had started production thinking that by the time we're finished, we'll have gathered the rest of this money, which is slightly risky, but you know, a calculated risk. And then I think it was Breadwinner was nominated for an Oscar in 2018, and we went over. Myself and Tom were doing the rounds, pitching TV series in LA. It's always good when you're over when you've been nominated and go over. All the doors are open in LA to go in and say hello to people. And Tara Sorensen had moved from Amazon. She worked in Amazon, and we'd done a TV series called Pete the Cat with Amazon. So we got to know Tara from that, from meeting her. I'd go to different markets, and you'd always have like a meeting with these people. And so Tara moved to Apple, and so we went in to Tara, myself, Jerry, and Tom. We were pitching her TV series because that's what we thought they wanted. And Tara asked about WolfWalkers because we'd shared it when we were pitching to Amazon, and it hadn't gone anywhere. And I says, "Oh, Tara, can you buy features?" And it's funny because it's the tech world moves so fast. She says, "I don't know, I'll ask." And so the next day she rang back. She says, "Turns out I can buy feature films, so let's start talking." So that was a great meeting, because then actually from that investment we got a great partner for distribution. Obviously they've been fantastic from the film's release. We were already started, so the film was already underway, and they were happy with, they'd seen the animatics, so they knew the film. They just, you make the film, we'll make sure it tries to gets an audience. So that was great. And a kind of, in a way, their investment then helped sort of pay back a lot of investors who'd been in, and it sort of gave security to the whole thing. So
on a practical level, I'm just wondering, Katja, did Apple being involved impact in the day-to-day noticeably?
Not very much, no. They were very hands-off. And I think it probably was because this arrangement was more like, okay, we are finance, we're doing it, and then they're gonna take the finished product and put it on their platform and help us distribute it. It's slightly different on the projects where we get funded. So I see much more interaction with the partners that basically give us the money in the first place. So they are much more involved. With WolfWalkers, I think just because they came in a little bit later, and it was always set up as this kind of arrangement where there was very little day-to-day in the production with Apple. Mm-hmm. Only then, once we were finished and they took over and they did the marketing campaign, then we had a lot of interaction, which was great. But when we were in production, there was very little.
That's a great partner in lots of ways.
Yeah, and I think their ambition is to be quite like that. I think if they trust the directors they're getting involved with, I think they knew what they were getting involved with Tom and the kind of film we're going to make. So they went, look, you know, and I guess maybe if it was a newer director, they might look over a bit more. And that's usually has been the case for us in our films, where we haven't necessarily had that on the feature films because we've generated the money ourselves. It's very much up to us if it's going to be good or not. And we take notes. And then My Father's Dragon, which is the thing produced now, it's a bit different because they're fully financing that. It came from a book that co-producers sent to us, and we decided, oh yeah, we'd like to get this going for you. And then we pitched it together to Netflix, and they says, yeah, we'll give you all the money, which is rare. And we're doing a TV series like that with another streamer at the moment. But in that case, still it's good. They had a whole like treatment of the serial. They says, we like this, you guys go ahead, and they see the scripts, and if they have any notes, they send good notes that help kind of where the notes that are good are notes where people go, we know where you want to go. And these notes, I think, will help you get there. We're not trying to change it in any way. We know the kind of story you're doing. So hopefully these notes are helpful. And so I mean, that's the great thing. A lot of these places do have fantastic script editor type people who can give really useful, practical advice.
I am imagining that things like yesterday's Golden Globe nomination really help in terms of getting projects off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit, Paul, about what it's been like as the studio's reputation is built internationally, how doors have opened? Yeah,
I mean, we used to joke back in the day when we got nominated for The Secret of Cows and for Song of the Sea, we always used to joke, geez, the nomination doesn't come with a cash prize. It costs you money to get there. So it was actually, when we got nominated for Secret of Kells, myself, Tom and Nora were literally in the meeting room in the Maltings, discussing how we can loan money to the company and how we can take out personal loans because we were broke. And we were very close to like shutting the doors. And then we got the Oscar nomination, which was great. And it was a great boost. But we still had a problem. It literally doesn't come straight away. You need to be able to take advantage of it somehow. And with Song of the Sea, we still had to fight. It still took us a long time to finance that. By the time Breadwinner came round, the 2 nominations from both of them really helped, because I think at that point, if we'd gone to a lot of the people who went, okay, we know you guys are going to do good. So there was people out there who were willing to just go with whatever the next film is going to be. And I think now we're in a position, particularly with the Golden Globes, and pretty much we've had a consistent good run with awards like that, there'll be more confidence that it's now kind of up to us what feature we kind of pitch next, and what we want, because I think we'll have enthusiastic partners, I think, in the future. But it's still a very slow build. I mean, it wasn't an overnight. I mean, we're started in 1999, so it's been like a long time to feel. It's been over 20 years to feel a little bit of confidence like this. A little bit now. We do feel a little confident. But the thing is, the hardest thing in the world to do is write a good script and write a good story, and that's always the challenge. It's always the toughest thing. So you still have to try to do that, because even if you get nominated and you show up then with a bad script, pitch material, people are going, all right, you're only as good as your last kind of thing you're pitching, really. So that's our job.
I will get shot if I don't ask you a bit about the Golden Globes nomination. So Katja, tell us a little bit about how the studio kept an eye on that yesterday.
Well, this is really nearly where I regret most that we are in working from home scenario, lockdown. So this is always the great highlight, when you have the whole crew together in a pub, or even in the studio, and we can all be together. So obviously that wasn't possible. So yesterday we organized a big Google Hangout call, so you could see everyone on the screen. And it's still great, obviously. I mean, there was a big yay and woohoo, and Tom had a bottle of champagne ready there, 2 toes. It was nice, but it just really is a shame not to be able to hug each other and jump around a bit in a pub and go out for a drink. So hopefully we'll have to, once the COVID crisis is over and we can all gather together. So we have a whole list of events that we have to
celebrate. Even just finishing the film. Yeah. We didn't really get that. It's so funny. We showed WolfWalkers during our own festival, Kilkenny Animated, before this Butler Gallery exhibition opened up. And I remember we were sitting after the first screening, myself, Tom and Cal and Ross and Alan Slattery were the only ones that had to, because we had to do something. And we kind of found ourselves sitting around the table kind of, we can celebrate just the 4 of us at least together, because we couldn't all be together, but we happened to be sitting somewhere. And that was a bit sad. And it's sad not to be in our usual. Normally we'd be in Los Angeles now looking at billboards. Well, we wouldn't be looking at billboards, but for the first time, Apple actually have billboards all over LA and New York for WolfWalkers. They even painted a giant 20-story building with a WolfWalkers poster, and we can't be there to see it, but it's nice to know they're there. But yeah. We just all got on the Google Meet and watched it together, and sort of cheered.
I am worried about jinxing anything by mentioning the other big award that nominations will be coming out for in the very near future. But before the call, we chatted a bit about the difference between the Golden Globes and the Oscars in terms of how those nominations are made. And for lots of people, they wouldn't be familiar with that. So I wonder, would you, just before we stop for Q&A, would you maybe just...
Oh yeah, I guess a quick the quick difference is, well, the Golden Globes is the Hollywood Foreign Press. So that's like a number of journalists living that are from different countries living in Los Angeles, and they may be writing, reviewing movies for papers in their country, in Argentina or in Germany or somewhere. And so that's quite a small group of people who for years now, the Golden Globes was kind of latched upon by distributors as like, let's really support this awards show. And they kind of made them very powerful all of a sudden, because people like Miramax and other people who wanted to create awareness for their films before the Oscars or before Christmas or right after Christmas to sell DVDs, wanted another award show. So kind of in many ways over the years, that show, that particular Golden Globes got lifted. So that in that scenario, you're kind of like hoping that those journalists have seen your film, because they're the ones who nominate. Whereas in the Oscars, it's slightly different. It's your peers. So for the Academy Awards, if you're in the animation chapter, which myself and a couple of others like Tom and Nora are, and Louise and Fabian, a few others in the studio, you're sort of not. If you get nominated, you can get into the Academy, or then you can nominate other people who you've worked with. So other people in the Academy can with 2 letters of support vouch for somebody to come in. And then, before the nominations, in your chapter you get to see all the animated feature films and short films, but you have to watch them all. So it's very much like for the nominations, the people who are voting for you do really have an interest in the films you're making. So they vote you in, which is what happened for us with Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea. I think there was a lot of animators who saw this. Oh, this is a very different original film, and they watched them all. And they used to actually go to a cinema. They had to go to a cinema or one of these screenings and vote when they walked out of the cinema. That's the way it used to be. So you're right. But then when it goes to to win after you're nominated, it's the entire Academy, and that's a bigger challenge kind of when you're an independent film, because you have to get like Brad Pitt to watch it, and somebody from the sound effects chapter, or people who are the makeup department chapter. They all have to have watched your film as well. And when there's tons of films to watch and they're kind of focused on the films they're interested in, it's harder to stand out A Secret of Kells or A Song of the Sea, because they'll go kind of, oh, well, I went to see Frozen the other day with my kid. I've seen that. So, and then they tick that one as their favorite. So then it's about awareness for the rest of the Academy. And that's kind of but we have for the first time, I think we have a really good, I suppose, stab at getting more awareness for the rest of the Academy with Apple, because they're really pushing and trying to get a lot of news articles out and a lot of big awareness campaign.
We will all be watching with bated breath for the next couple of months to see how things pan out.
You never know. Yeah, and you don't want to jinx it either.
Yeah, big
about even getting nominated.
Over our shoulders when we even mention it, I think. But I'm conscious there are probably lots of questions, so maybe we'll bring Alan back now to share some of those with Paul and Katja.
Thanks, Anne. Yes, and thank you, Katja and Paul, for a fascinating conversation. We do have quite a lot of questions for you, actually. And as it's been quite financial in orientation, particularly the first half of your talk, questions have reflected that. So a few questions, for instance, from Conal has come in asking, can you talk about what the proposed budget was for WolfWalkers? Is that something you can discuss? And obviously COVID has struck, and how has that affected the promotion for you with the movie? And how irritating has that been in terms of a theatrical release in Ireland?
I'm not sure I am able to say the budget now that we got Apple involved, but I can tell you this: for Song of the Sea and The Secret of Kells, our budgets were around this $8 million, range, and then we've gone up a bit from there. And My Father's Dragon is quite different. It's because we're doing it all in Ireland. It's quite a higher budget. So budgets can range between, very, I think a lot of independent animated features range between $6 million and maybe 15 million, up and down, and then bigger again if you're maybe fully funded by somebody, which is very different almost to the studio films, which are multiples of that, the CGI features. But because we're independent, we also want to because you have to strike that balance as well of like how much your budget is. If you own the film and you have to also sell it, you don't want it to be too high because you also want to make your money back and you want to be able to pay back your investors. So you don't want to be a random big number. So the second part was COVID. Yeah.
The release and how it's affected.
Well, it was very disappointing not to really have it for much length of time in Irish cinemas, because we really had a good, with Wildcard in particular, who are our partners in distribution in the UK and Ireland. It was very disappointing not to have. We had a load of cinemas lined up and waiting and eager for the film, and we just couldn't do it. We, I think, came out briefly and then we were shut down again. That was sad. Fortunately, we did have Apple then, so by December like 13th or December, it was about December 8th maybe, December 10th actually, Apple brought it out. But we had then a month, we were supposedly would have had just a bit over a month to have had it in theatres, and theatres were going to keep it through Christmas. So that was a bit disappointing, but it was good that we had the backup of Apple's platform to get people to see it. And we had just finished doing the sound in Grouse Lodge in the middle of Ireland in Athlone, which is a lovely studio space. And we had Bruno Coulet, the composer, over, and we Keela down. And I love that part of it. It's because when most of our work is done and we're listening to the musicians add to it, like I was literally sitting myself and Ross and Tom in the studio room, and the guys are banging drums, playing instruments, and they just and just adding to the compositional score that Bruno had got from Bulgaria, from the orchestra there. So we did a week or maybe more in Grouse Lodge to get those bits of instrumentation done, and then lockdown hit. And I think we would have been really stuck if it was a week later. Literally, Bruno got back to Paris with his team, and the Keela guys and us, we went home, and lockdown was Monday, or it was a full lockdown Monday.
Wow, right up to the end, basically.
Yeah. And then for My Father's Dragon, we've continued remotely. Our IT guys did some sort of black magic, even with like remote working, where even with really heavy files like compositing, Gabor and Lee, for even people working on those very heavy layered files, they're working on the machines that are in the studio connected to the server, but through a portal in their home. So they're using the power of the machines, but we're operating them from their desktop at home, which is really cool. So in many ways, animation hasn't suffered. And it's actually, in many ways, animation, when it comes to financing, has benefited over the live action guys. Live action's been really struck, but all those content people are hungry for stuff. So they're actually calling us more now, is it what you have? And so in a way, animation has been able to keep going.
Great. Yes, that's good news. Something that you both mentioned, the diversity of studios, and few of the questions are connected and related to that. One in particular asked about the films of Cartoon Saloon, and particularly WolfWalkers in the last few, are based on Irish culture and mythology. This comes in from a question from Nick, and he wants to know really, does working with studios from other countries that may not be familiar with this mythology, does that cause problems or any issues?
No, not really. Or Katja, do you want to say? Yes.
No, I don't think so, because, well, first of all, we work with a lot of people from Spain, France, Poland, even in Kilkenny. So our team here in Ireland, it's not at all completely Irish. And when you develop the look, you do a lot of research. So Paul already mentioned the trip. So we do these kind of research trips at the earlier stage, and then all our team can soak up the Irish nature. And
I actually think there's an advantage in one sense. Sorry, because actually we're only looking at a background the other day, and I think we looked at a background from Song of the Sea that Adrian Merijo did, the art director, and in one sense, his fresh eyes. Now this is just in the look, but the foreigners, the Spaniards and French coming to Irish shores and looking at Irish skylines, they paint them far better than we are because they're so fresh eyes. There's this great painting of like what Irish clouds look like, and there's gee, who did that? And it's usually on this case it was a foreign artist who'd come in, and they just have a great perspective on it. And then when it comes to just the storytelling and stuff, that's kind of created by the guys. So you're kind of working from a very research template. It's not necessarily going to have effect as long as you're telling a fairly universal story that everybody can understand, and all stories are fairly universal. You can be very authentic to place then. If your story is good, if it's a dramatic story anyone in the world can follow it if it's dealing with human emotions and human issues and telling a human story. Then the authenticity of place that you bring to it doesn't really. I watched a film from. Set about a guy from Mexico moving, having to leave and work in New York, and his life, his place was totally alien to me, but the interactions between him and his teenage friends were exactly Irish. You know, you could imagine it being, you know, so that sort of thing is universal, but the place can be different. And actually, I think it's more interesting for us as independent filmmakers to pitch into international community being very authentic, because then you stand out. You're not trying to be like a US film or like anybody else. If you have an authentic voice, you'll kind of create a shelf space for yourself.
You know, fascinating. And global stories, it all touches every humanity. Tangentially related to that, actually, to that question, Nathan has asked, is it possible then for somebody who doesn't draw or maybe see that they have a skill for animation to still pitch concepts for animated movies or TV series? Would that be feasible?
Now, the honest answer is that's tricky. I would have to manage expectations there. That doesn't really happen with us because we have a studio full of 180, soon to be over 200 animators just in our studio. They all have ambitions to make stuff. So the people we're going to talk to first are our own animators, and we've made animation take so long. We've only really done so many. Like we've done, is it 4 animated features now? We're into our 5th, and 2 TV series, really, Skunk Fu and Puff and Rock, and another one, and we've serviced others. So there's not that many projects we can actually do. There's a sort of a bottleneck with us. So we're kind of only interested in talking to people we feel are going to be able to execute. There's a strange thing, you know, ideas, people pitch ideas all the time, and I think ideas are they're not worthless, but there's not much value in an idea. There's only value when it's executed and how it's done. So like you can have a very simple idea that can turn into a wonderful film because of the writer you put around it, because of the director, it's how it's executed. Because there's such a challenge in executing that well. So we tend to look at the person, like Louise, for example, who's going to direct the next movie, the one movie next that's not either by Tom or Nora. Because we said to her kind of, we really think you're going to be a strong director, Louise. What do you want to do? It's not like we're going, here, we're looking for ideas from somebody on the outside and we'll make your dreams come true. We kind of want to make the directors we like, we want to make their dreams come true, you know, and ourselves, well, so that is trickier, even though there's plenty of producers who do look for that. But because we're a studio that we want to grow our artists within, we want to serve their ambitions first.
Yeah, that's a straightforward answer, I think. And actually, we've had a lot of people attend today who are in the early stage careers working in animation and studios. And Alicia, who actually starts next week as a production assistant for an animation production management company, has asked for someone like her in this role, what would you recommend in terms of books or sources to really, I suppose, get confident going forward in such a role in this early stage?
Well, the truth is, I haven't read that many books, so I would also refer to what Paul already mentioned. It's the book Producing Animation from Sarah Daulatabadi. So that's one of the resources that's out there that I'm familiar with. I personally have, I think, learned everything through praxis rather than theory. Paul, would you know any?
Yeah, I think I would recommend Creative Inc. as a wider by Ed Catmull, who started Pixar with back in the day, and he's written a book called Creativity Inc. or Creativity Inc., which is really good. It's about managing creative teams. It discusses the whole pipeline of animation, which you could look at. It's much broader. It's not the detail of particularly, but we even have, and it's funny, in the studio, we often think this because every project is sort of different, but even our technical director, Mark, is trying to do a kind of how we do things, which is always difficult to do, but he's trying to write down how we do it more. But my advice is just to get stuck in and and learn from your the people around you, and study the different schedules.
Just throw in one thing there, which is a quote from Mark's talk last week, where he said, and he was quoting somebody, "Be so good that you can't be ignored."
You can't go far wrong with this, I think. Again, as always, I didn't get around to every question, but thank you all for sending them through. We're going to keep a record of your questions and hold them. And obviously then we'll try to display them or put them out into the public realm as best we can later with answers to that. But just before I hand back to Anne for the final word, just for those people still with us now, next week, following up, we will have the character designers. So we will be joined by Sandra Anderson and Sven Rothman Bond. So that equally, I think, will be interesting for a lot of people to join on. But from me, thank you, Katja and Paul, and I'll hand back to Anne.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Paul and Katja, for again being so generous with your time and so open in your answers, because I think it's a fascinating opportunity for people to really get a look at what happens behind the scenes. I'll apologize again for the phone. It's on Do Not Disturb and it's on the laptop. I need to sort this for next week.
Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't have nice visuals like what most of the presentations to do at WolfWalkers, but yeah, we had to talk more about money and schedules. I always find that.
But I think that's
important.
fascinating.
Important.
Yeah, this is a glimpse that people often don't get.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing it. Okay.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you all for attending as well. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.